Montana Territory, 1879. The first winter snow dusted the distant peaks of the Bridger Mountains as Zachary Nash stared at his reflection in the cracked mirror. The face that stared back was weathered by grief and hard work, eyes hollow, beard unkempt. 3 months a widower, and still he could not bring himself to enter the kitchen where Elizabeth had spent her days. "Papa." 7-year-old Sarah appeared in the doorway, her small hand clutching a rag doll that had seen better days. Zachary forced a smile and knelt down to her level. "What is it, little one?" "I'm hungry, Papa." The simple statement hit him like a physical blow. Of course she was hungry. The last of the neighbor women's casseroles had been consumed days ago. Mrs. Peterson from the next ranch over had stopped by with food regularly after the funeral, but even the goodwill of neighbors had its limits. "I'll fix something," he promised, though they both knew his cooking skills extended to burnt coffee and charred beans. Sarah's eyes lit up suddenly. "Or we could ask Mama's angel to cook for us." Zachary felt his throat tighten. "What angel, Sarah?" "The one Mama promised to send when she went to heaven." Sarah spoke with such certainty that it made his heart ache. "She told me not to worry about you being sad forever, because she would send an angel to help us." He stroked her hair, unable to crush her childish faith with reality. Elizabeth had been delirious with fever in those final days. "Well, until that angel arrives, how about some beans?" he offered weakly. Sarah's face fell, but she nodded bravely. After another disastrous meal that evening, Zachary sat on the porch, staring out at his struggling cattle ranch. The two-pine spread had been Elizabeth's dream as much as his when they'd claimed the land 5 years ago. Now, with winter approaching, half his cattle sold off to pay for the doctor's futile efforts, and no help to speak of, he was facing the very real possibility of losing everything. The sound of wagon wheels broke the silence. Squinting against the setting sun, Zachary watched a battered stagecoach approach, unusual for this remote stretch. It rolled to a stop, and the driver called down. "This the Two Pines Ranch." "It is," Zachary answered cautiously, hand instinctively moving toward the rifle propped against the wall. The stagecoach door swung open, and a young woman stepped down. She wore a simple traveling dress, practical but neat, and carried a single valise. Her auburn hair was swept into a sensible bun, though several tendrils had escaped to frame a face that, while not conventionally beautiful, possessed a quiet dignity. "Mr. Nash?" she asked, approaching the porch. "I'm Stella Thompson. I believe you advertised for a cook and housekeeper." Zachary stared at her in confusion. "I did no such thing, Miss Thompson." Her confident expression faltered. "But I have this notice." She withdrew a folded newspaper clipping from her reticule. "Two Pines Ranch seeks experienced cook and housekeeper. Room and board provided. Apply in person." He took the paper, studying the unfamiliar print. "I'm afraid there's been some mistake. I never placed this advertisement." The driver interrupted. "Well, paid fare or not, I've got a schedule to keep." He tossed down the woman's trunk and was back on the road before either could protest. Miss Thompson stood awkwardly in the yard, the light fading around her. I see. I've come all the way from Bozeman." Her voice remained steady, though her hands gripped her valise tighter. "Perhaps I could trouble you for directions to the nearest town?" "That would be Willow Creek, miss. 15 miles south." Zachary gestured vaguely, feeling a twinge of guilt as her face paled. 15 miles? I see." Just then, Sarah burst from the house, stopping short at the sight of the stranger. Her eyes widened as she took in the woman's appearance. "Are you the angel?" she asked bluntly. "Sarah," Zachary admonished, but Miss Thompson smiled gently. "I'm afraid not, child. Just a woman who's made a very long journey for nothing, it seems. But you came right when we needed you," Sarah insisted, turning to her father. "Papa, Mama said her angel would know how to cook." Miss Thompson's eyebrows rose. "I am a cook, among other things." "Sarah, please go inside," Zachary said firmly. When his daughter had reluctantly obeyed, he turned back to the stranger. "My apologies, Miss Thompson. My wife passed recently, and my daughter has some fanciful ideas." "I'm very sorry for your loss," she replied, sincerity evident in her tone. Zachary glanced at the darkening sky, then back at the stranded woman. Whatever mysterious forces had brought her here, he couldn't in good conscience send her walking 15 miles at dusk. "You can stay the night in our spare room. I'll drive you to town in the morning." Relief crossed her features. "Thank you. I'm happy to earn my keep." Perhaps I could prepare dinner. Before he could respond, a crash came from inside the house, followed by Sarah's wail. They rushed in to find her standing amid the shattered remains of a pot, beans spilled across the floor. I was trying to help, she sobbed. Miss Thompson immediately knelt beside her. Are you hurt? Let me see your hands. She examined the child gently, then smiled. No harm done. Now, what do you say we clean this up and start fresh? As Zachary watched the stranger navigate his kitchen with surprising ease, transforming the meager pantry contents into something that actually smelled edible, he couldn't help wondering about the mysterious advertisement that had brought her to his door. Later, as they ate the first proper meal they'd had in weeks, Sarah beamed at their visitor. See, Papa? I told you Mama would send help. Zachary caught Miss Thompson's eye across the table, and something unspoken passed between them, a shared understanding that some questions were better left unasked for now. That night, lying in bed, he stared at the ceiling, wondering what Elizabeth would make of the situation. Had someone in town placed the advertisement out of pity? Or was there something more inexplicable at work? Either way, he couldn't deny that for the first time since Elizabeth's death, his home had felt like more than just a shell of memories. Morning brought clarity, as it often did. Zachary rose early, determined to drive Miss Thompson to town as promised. But when he entered the kitchen, he found her already at work, cooking breakfast while simultaneously inventorying his depleted pantry. Mr. Nash, she said without turning, your flour has weevils, your preserves are nearly gone, and you have precisely 2 potatoes left to your name. How exactly have you been feeding your daughter? The directness of her assessment caught him off guard. We've been managing. She turned then, fixing him with a look that brooked no argument. No, sir, you have not. Miss Thompson, I propose a temporary arrangement, she interrupted. 1 month. Give me 1 month to put your household in order before winter sets in. I'll cook, clean, mend, and help with whatever else needs doing. In return, you provide room, board, and a modest wage when you're able. And after the month? If you wish me to leave then, I will. No questions asked. Zachary ran a hand through his hair, weighing the proposition. Pride told him to refuse. Practicality argued otherwise. Before he could respond, Sarah burst into the kitchen, her face lighting up at the sight of Miss Thompson. You're still here, she exclaimed. Papa, can she stay? Please. Miss Thompson smiled at the child, then turned expectant eyes to Zachary. He found himself nodding before he'd fully decided. 1 month, he agreed. Trial basis. The transformation of Two Pines Ranch began that very day. Miss Thompson attacked the house with vigor, opening windows that had been shuttered since Elizabeth's passing, airing bedding, scrubbing floors. She made lists of supplies, mended clothing, and somehow managed to create nourishing meals from their paltry stores. By the end of the first week, Zachary found himself watching her with growing curiosity. She was clearly educated, her speech refined despite her practical skills. Yet she never spoke of her past or her reasons for answering an advertisement for such a remote position. Where did you learn to cook like this? He asked one evening as she served a stew that made even the tough old rooster she'd dispatched taste delicious. My mother taught me the basics. The rest I learned working for various households. Her answer was polite, but revealed nothing. And what brought you to Montana Territory? Her hands stilled momentarily. A desire for open spaces, I suppose. Most women don't travel alone to territories still half-wild for open spaces. Miss Thompson. She met his gaze steadily. Perhaps I'm not most women, Mr. Nash. The challenge in her voice stirred something in him. Curiosity, respect, and something else he wasn't ready to name. Before he could pursue the conversation, Sarah interrupted with a request for more stew, and the moment passed. That night, he found himself unable to sleep, thinking about the mysterious woman under his roof. There was something she wasn't saying, some reason she'd fled to this remote corner of the territory. The question was whether her secrets posed any danger to his daughter or his home. The following day, Zachary rode into Willow Creek for supplies, driven by Miss Thompson's detailed list and his own determination to learn more about her. At the general store, he casually inquired whether anyone knew of a Stella Thompson recently arrived from back east. Mrs. Miller, the storekeeper's wife and the town's most reliable source of gossip, perked up immediately. Stella Thompson, you say? Wouldn't be related to that banking family from Philadelphia, would she? There was quite the scandal a few months back. Their daughter ran off after refusing to marry some railroad baron twice her age. Zachary kept his expression neutral. I couldn't say. Just heard the name in passing. Well, if she's who I'm thinking of, her father disowned her publicly. It was in all the Eastern papers. Mrs. Miller leaned closer. They say the man she was supposed to marry was powerful enough to ruin her reputation completely. Interesting, Zachary murmured, paying for his purchases and departing with more questions than answers. When he returned to the ranch, he found Miss Thompson and Sarah in the side yard, hanging laundry. His daughter was laughing, a sound he hadn't heard in months, as Miss Thompson taught her a song about butterflies. The sight gave him pause. Whatever Stella Thompson's past might be, her presence had already brought light back into his home. That evening, after Sarah had gone to bed, Zachary found Miss Thompson darning socks by lamplight in the kitchen. "Those are mine," he observed, recognizing the worn wool. Yes, the holes were large enough to accommodate a family of field mice. Her needle flashed in the lamplight as she worked. He sat across from her. "I went to town today." "I know. I hope you found everything on the list." "I did. I also heard some interesting talk." Her hands stilled, but she didn't look up. "Did you?" "About a Philadelphia banking heiress who fled rather than marry a man chosen by her father." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the ticking of the clock and the occasional pop from the stove. Finally, she set down her darning. "Are you asking me to leave, Mr. Nash?" "No." The certainty in his voice surprised even him. "But I would appreciate honesty between us, Miss Thompson. Or should I say, Miss Thornton?" Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "How did you?" "I didn't. Until now." He couldn't help a small smile at having confirmed his suspicion. "Your reaction gave you away." Color rose in her cheeks. "That was unkind. Perhaps. But necessary." He leaned forward. "I have a young daughter to protect. I need to know who's living under my roof." Stella sighed, resignation in the slump of her shoulders. "Very well. Yes, I am Stella Thornton. My father is indeed a banker in Philadelphia. He arranged my marriage to Cornelius Ward, a man 30 years my senior with a reputation for cruelty toward his previous wives." She met his eyes defiantly. "I chose to forge my own path instead." "With no resources?" Zachary pressed. "I had some savings of my own. Enough to get me west, where I hoped to disappear. I saw your advertisement in a Bozeman paper and thought a remote ranch would be the perfect place to hide." She paused. "Though I'm still puzzled as to who placed it, if not you." "As am I." Zachary studied her face, finding only sincerity there. "Is there any danger of this Mr. Ward coming after you?" "I doubt it. His pride was wounded, not his heart. By now, he's likely found another heiress to pursue." She hesitated. "My father, however, he's not a man who accepts defiance easily." "I see." Zachary considered this information. "Well, Miss Thornton, please," she interrupted. "Continue calling me Thompson. I'd prefer to leave that name behind." He nodded. "Miss Thompson, then. Your past is your own. As long as you're honest with me from now on, and as long as your presence doesn't endanger my daughter, your position here is secure. For the month we agreed upon, at least." Relief flooded her features. "Thank you, Mr. Nash." As October gave way to November, the rhythms of ranch life began to stabilize under Stella's efficient management. The house, once a monument to grief, became a home again. Sarah blossomed under the attention of a female presence, and even Zachary found himself looking forward to evenings by the fire, listening to Stella read aloud while he mended harnesses or cleaned his guns. On a particularly cold morning, Zachary came in from the barn to find Stella teaching Sarah how to make biscuits, flour dusting both their noses. The sight stopped him in his tracks, not because it reminded him of Elizabeth, but because it didn't. This was something new, something unexpected, and the realization that he could find joy in such moments again left him momentarily speechless. Stella looked up, catching him watching them. Something flickered in her eyes, awareness, perhaps, before she quickly returned her attention to the dough. "Your father is letting in all the cold air, Sarah," she said lightly. "Perhaps he needs something to do with his hands." Sarah giggled. "Papa, come help us. Stella says I'm a natural baker." He hesitated, then hung up his coat and rolled up his sleeves. "I warn you, I've never made a biscuit in my life." "Then it's high time you learned," Stella replied, making room for him at the table. Standing beside her, shoulders occasionally brushing as they worked the dough, Zachary became acutely aware of her. The scent of lavender that clung to her hair, the graceful movements of her hands, the way she bit her lower lip in concentration. When their fingers touched over the rolling pin, they both pulled back as if burned. "Sorry," he mumbled. "No. Please, you try," she insisted, a flush creeping up her neck. Sarah watched them curiously. "Papa, your ears are all red." Zachary cleared his throat. "Must be the heat from the stove." Stella turned away quickly, but not before he caught the smile she was trying to hide. That night, long after Sarah and Stella had gone to bed, Zachary sat alone by the dying fire, confronting a truth he'd been avoiding. He was developing feelings for the woman who had so unexpectedly entered their lives. The realization brought both guilt and confusion. It had been only 4 months since Elizabeth's death. Too soon, surely, to be thinking of another woman. Yet Elizabeth's final words came back to him now. "Promise me you won't bury yourself with me, Zach. Sarah needs a mother, and you need love." He had made that promise, never imagining he would be tested so soon. The peaceful routine they had established was shattered 3 days later when Zachary returned from checking fence lines to find an expensive carriage parked in the yard. The horses alone were worth more than his entire herd. His stomach knotted with foreboding as he dismounted and strode toward the house. Inside, he found Stella standing rigidly by the fireplace, facing an elegantly dressed older man whose bearing screamed wealth and authority. Sarah was nowhere to be seen. "Ah," the man said coldly as Zachary entered. "I presume this is your employer." Stella's face was pale, but her voice was steady. "Mr. Nash, this is my father, Harold Thornton. He has come to take me back to Philadelphia." Thornton barely acknowledged Zachary with a curt nod. "I've spent considerable resources tracking down my wayward daughter, Mr. Nash. I apologize for any inconvenience, but Stella will be returning with me immediately." "I will not," Stella said quietly but firmly. "I am of age, father. You have no authority over me." Thornton's expression hardened. "You have responsibilities to your family name. The agreement with Ward can still be salvaged if we act quickly." "There is no agreement. I refused his proposal. You embarrassed him publicly, and you attempted to sell me to a man known for breaking his wife's spirits." Stella's composure cracked momentarily before she regained control. "I've made my decision." Thornton turned to Zachary. "Mr. Nash, my daughter has clearly been laboring under some romantic delusion of frontier life. I'm prepared to compensate you generously for any inconvenience her departure might cause." Zachary felt anger rising within him at the man's presumption. "Miss Thompson is employed here of her own free will. She's welcome to stay as long as she wishes." "Thompson?" Thornton's laugh was cutting. "Already hiding behind false names, I see." He fixed Zachary with a calculating gaze. $500. A substantial sum for a struggling rancher such as yourself. The offer hung in the air between them. It was indeed a fortune, enough to see the ranch through winter with ease and then some. Zachary could feel Stella watching him, tension radiating from her still form. "Mr. Thornton," Zachary said evenly, "I suggest you leave my property now." The banker's face darkened. "You would refuse good money to harbor a disobedient daughter? What exactly is your interest in Stella, Mr. Nash?" Before Zachary could respond, Sarah appeared in the doorway, clutching her rag doll. "Papa? Is everything all right?" Thornton's gaze shifted to the child, his expression softening slightly. "Your daughter, I presume? Where is her mother?" The blunt question struck like a physical blow. "My mama's in heaven," Sarah answered before Zachary could speak. "But she sent Stella to take care of us." She approached Stella and slipped her small hand into the woman's. "Are you Stella's papa? She makes the best apple cake. Do you want some?" The innocence of the child's question seemed to momentarily disarm the older man. He studied Sarah, then looked at his daughter with new eyes, noting perhaps for the first time the protective way Stella held the child's hand. "I see." His tone was unreadable. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately, Stella." Zachary intervened. "Sarah, why don't you go help Rosa in the kitchen? Mr. Thornton and Miss Thompson need to talk." After the child had reluctantly departed, Thornton spoke more quietly. "I had not realized your situation here involved a motherless child." He straightened his gloves. "Nevertheless, Stella, your place is with your family. Your mother is quite distraught over your disappearance." Something flickered across Stella's face. Doubt, perhaps, or guilt. Is mother truly upset? Of course. What did you expect? Zachary watched Stella's resolve waver and felt a surge of fear that she might actually leave. The thought of returning to the empty, joyless house they had inhabited before her arrival was suddenly unbearable. Mr. Thornton, he said impulsively, might I suggest a compromise? Stay a few days. See the life your daughter has chosen for herself. If you still wish her to return after that, at least you'll part with better understanding. Both Thorntons looked surprised at the suggestion. Stay? Here. Harold looked around the modest ranch house with barely concealed disdain. I think not. My driver has secured rooms in town. Then visit, Zachary pressed. Take meals with us. Observe before you decide. Stella gave Zachary a questioning look, clearly surprised by his intervention. He returned her gaze steadily, hoping she could read in his eyes what he wasn't yet ready to say aloud. After a long moment, Thornton sighed. Very well. 3 days. I will return tomorrow to continue our discussion. He turned to his daughter. I expect you to seriously reconsider your position, Stella. After he had departed in his fine carriage, Stella turned to Zachary, her expression a mixture of gratitude and confusion. Why did you do that? You could have been rid of me and $500 richer. Zachary stepped closer, fighting the urge to take her hands in his. Is that what you want? To leave? No, she admitted softly. But I never expected you to stand up to my father. Few people do. I'm not most people, Miss Thompson, he said, echoing her earlier words. A smile touched her lips. No, you certainly are not, Mr. Nash. That evening, after Sarah had been put to bed, they sat together on the porch despite the chill, watching stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Tell me about your wife, Stella said suddenly. Sarah speaks of her often, but you never do. Zachary was silent for so long that Stella began to think he wouldn't answer. Elizabeth was sunshine, he finally said. We grew up together back in Missouri. Everyone always knew we would marry someday. He smiled faintly at the memory. She convinced me to come west, to build something of our own. This ranch was her dream as much as mine. She sounds remarkable. She was. He turned to look at Stella. She would have liked you. The simple statement hung between them, laden with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge. What will you do if your father insists you return? Zachary asked. Stella gazed out at the darkened landscape. I don't know. I have no legal recourse if he threatens to cut me off completely. And while I've enjoyed pretending to be self-sufficient these past weeks, the truth is I have very few practical skills to support myself independently. I would disagree with that assessment, Zachary said. You've transformed this household in a month's time. You're resourceful, hardworking, and intelligent. You're kind to say so. It's not kindness, Stella. It's truth. He hesitated, then added quietly. And there are other options besides returning to Philadelphia. She turned to him, questions in her eyes, but before he could elaborate, the sound of an approaching rider interrupted them. Zachary stood, hand moving instinctively to the gun at his hip as he peered into the darkness. Who would be calling at this hour? Stella wondered. The answer came moments later as the rider emerged into the pool of light from the house, a young man from the telegraph office in Willow Creek. Mr. Nash, he called, dismounting quickly. Urgent telegram for Miss Stella Thornton. Stella stepped forward, accepting the envelope with trembling hands. Thank you. After the messenger had been paid and sent on his way, she broke the seal, reading the brief message by the light spilling from the window. Her face paled. What is it? Zachary asked, alarmed by her expression. It's from my mother's maid. Stella's voice shook slightly. My mother has suffered an apoplectic fit. She's asking for me. She looked up at Zachary, conflict evident in her features. I must go to her. Of course, he agreed, though the words felt like ashes in his mouth. When? Immediately. Tomorrow morning, with father. She folded the telegram carefully. I'm sorry, Zachary. I know this leaves you without help just as winter is setting in. Don't worry about us, he said, though the prospect of her departure left a hollow feeling in his chest. Family comes first. She nodded, not meeting his eyes. I should pack my things. As she turned to go inside, Zachary caught her arm gently. Stella, will you return? She looked back at him, and in the dim light, he thought he saw tears shimmering in her eyes. I don't know, she whispered. I want to, but then take this, he said impulsively, pulling his mother's ring from his little finger where he'd worn it since inheriting it years ago. As a promise that you'll always have a place here, should you choose to claim it. Stella stared at the simple silver band. Zachary, I couldn't possibly. Please, he insisted. Consider it security, if nothing else. Something of value you can sell if circumstances require. After a moment's hesitation, she accepted the ring, closing her fingers around it tightly. Thank you. I'll treasure it. They stood there in the starlight, so much left unsaid between them, until finally Stella broke away and disappeared into the house. Zachary remained on the porch long after, watching the stars and wondering if he would ever see her again. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Stella moved through the house like a ghost, packing her few belongings and instructing Zachary on the location of preserved foods and the schedule she'd established for household chores. Sarah followed her from room to room, increasingly distressed as she realized what was happening. You can't go, she finally burst out as Stella folded the last of her dresses into her trunk. You promised to stay for Christmas. You promised to teach me to make gingerbread men. Stella knelt to the child's level. I'm sorry, Sarah. My mother is very ill and needs me. You understand about helping family, don't you? But we're your family too. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. Mama sent you to us. You can't leave. Stella gathered the sobbing child into her arms, her own eyes wet. Oh, my darling girl. I will miss you terribly. Then don't go, Sarah pleaded. Sarah, Zachary intervened gently from the doorway. Miss Thompson has responsibilities to her own mother. We must respect that. The child pulled away from Stella, hurt and betrayal in her expression. I hate you. I hate both of you. She ran from the room, slamming her bedroom door behind her. Stella rose slowly, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry. I've only made things worse for you. She'll understand eventually, Zachary said, though his heart ached for his daughter's pain. Children are resilient. The sound of approaching carriage wheels signaled Harold Thornton's arrival. Zachary helped carry Stella's trunk outside, where the banker waited impatiently beside his driver. Are you ready, Stella? Thornton asked, his tone softened somewhat from the previous day. The doctor's telegram this morning indicated Mother's condition is unchanged. We should reach Bozeman by nightfall and catch the eastbound train tomorrow. Yes, Father. Stella turned to Zachary, formally extending her hand. Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Nash. I've left instructions for managing the household. He took her hand, fighting the urge to pull her into his arms instead. Safe travels, Miss Thompson. As the driver loaded her trunk, Stella glanced toward the house, her expression falling. Sarah didn't come to say goodbye. Give her time, Zachary said. Perhaps you could write to her? She'd like that. Of course. Harold Thornton cleared his throat. We must be going if we're to reach town before dark. Stella nodded, allowing her father to hand her into the carriage. As she settled on the seat, her hand went to her throat, where Zachary noticed his mother's ring hanging from a ribbon around her neck. Their eyes met one last time, and then the driver flicked the reins, and the carriage pulled away down the long drive. Zachary stood watching until it disappeared from view, a sense of loss washing over him so profound that for a moment he couldn't move. Only when he heard Sarah's muffled sobs through her bedroom window did he rouse himself to go comfort his daughter. The days that followed were darker than any since Elizabeth's death. Sarah retreated into a sullen silence, refusing to discuss Stella or acknowledge the woman's absence. The house, briefly brought to life, seemed to settle back into mourning. Zachary did his best to maintain the routine Stella had established, but his cooking was dismal and the cleaning sporadic at best. 2 weeks after Stella's departure, a letter arrived addressed to Sarah. The child snatched it eagerly, disappearing into her room to read it in private. When she emerged hours later, her eyes were red-rimmed, but her expression calmer. Stella says her mother is doing better, she informed Zachary. And she's teaching her cook to make gingerbread men so she can tell me how to do it in her next letter. That's nice of her, Zachary said carefully. Sarah studied him with solemn eyes. She also said to tell you that she wears your ring every day and thinks of us. Zachary felt his heart constrict. Did she? Sarah tilted her head. Papa, do you miss Stella? Yes, he admitted. I do. Then why didn't you ask her to stay? The simple question contained all the directness of childhood. It's complicated, Sarah. She has responsibilities to her family. We're family too, Sarah insisted. You said so. It's different. Why? Zachary sighed, unable to explain concepts of social standing and obligation to a 7-year-old when he himself resented them so deeply. Sometimes adults have to make difficult choices. Sarah considered this, then nodded decisively. I'm going to write back to her. Can I use your desk? Of course. As December arrived with its shorter days and biting cold, letters continued to flow between Philadelphia and the Two Pines Ranch. Stella wrote to Sarah weekly, each envelope containing small treasures, pressed flowers, sketches of Philadelphia landmarks, even once a length of ribbon for Sarah's hair. To Zachary, she wrote less frequently and more formally, inquiring after the ranch and offering practical advice for winter preparations. He replied with equal restraint, describing the cattle, the weather, the repairs to the barn roof. Neither mentioned the current that had run between them during her stay, nor the ring she still wore. It was as if by mutual agreement they had decided to pretend their connection had been merely that of employer and employee. As Christmas approached, Sarah became increasingly preoccupied with a secret project, disappearing into her room for hours with paper, pencils, and mysterious packages from the general store that she refused to let Zachary see. When he questioned her, she only smiled and said it was Christmas business. On Christmas Eve, as they sat before the fire after a simple meal, Sarah suddenly announced, "Stella is coming back." Zachary looked up sharply. "What makes you say that?" "I asked her to in my letters. And I prayed really hard." Sarah spoke with absolute conviction. "Mama promised her angel would stay with us." "Sarah," Zachary began gently, not wanting to crush her hopes, but needing to prepare her for disappointment. "Stella has obligations in Philadelphia. Her mother has been ill, and she'll come," Sarah insisted, setting her jaw in a way that reminded him painfully of Elizabeth. "You'll see," he sighed, deciding not to argue. "It's time for bed, little one. Santa won't come if you're still awake." After settling Sarah for the night, Zachary returned to the fire, pouring himself a small measure of whiskey. He raised the glass in a silent toast to the empty chair where Stella had once sat, allowing himself to imagine, just for a moment, what might have been if circumstances had been different. The sound of approaching hoofbeats roused him from his reverie. Frowning, he set down his glass and moved to the window, peering out into the moonlit yard. A lone rider was approaching, hunched against the cold. As they drew nearer, Zachary's pulse quickened. There was something familiar about the figure's posture. He grabbed his coat and stepped onto the porch just as the rider reined in. For a long moment, neither spoke as snow drifted down between them. Then Stella Thompson pushed back her hood, her face illuminated by the light spilling from the open door. "Hello, Zachary," she said softly. He stared, convinced he must be dreaming. "Stella? What are you doing here?" She dismounted, moving toward him with a grace that even heavy winter clothing couldn't disguise. "I promised Sarah I'd teach her to make gingerbread men for Christmas." "You rode all this way alone?" "In December." "Not alone. I hired a guide from Bozeman." She gestured vaguely back toward the road. "He's returning to town now that I've arrived safely." Zachary shook his head in disbelief. "Your father allowed this?" A smile touched her lips. "My father and I reached an understanding. After seeing my mother improve, he was more receptive to my wishes." She hesitated, then added, "Particularly when I explained that I had received a proposal of marriage from a Montana rancher." Zachary's breath caught. "Did you now?" "Well, not in so many words." Her gloved hand went to the ring visible at her throat. But this felt very much like a promise. He stepped closer, hardly daring to believe she was really there. "It was. Then I thought I should return to properly accept it." She looked up at him, vulnerability and hope mingled in her expression. "Unless I misunderstood?" In answer, Zachary closed the distance between them, drawing her into his arms and kissing her with all the longing of the past months. She responded with equal fervor, her cold cheeks warming beneath his touch. When they finally broke apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I thought I'd never see you again. I tried to stay away," she confessed. "I told myself it was too soon, that you needed more time to grieve Elizabeth. But then Sarah's letters came, and yours, and I realized that life is too precious and too uncertain to waste on conventions and timing." "What about your mother? Your family?" "Mother is much recovered. And as for family," she smiled, "I told my parents I had found mine. Here, with you and Sarah." He kissed her again, marveling at the miracle of her presence. "Sarah will be ecstatic when she wakes up tomorrow." "About that," Stella said, a mischievous glint in her eye. I may have coordinated my arrival with her. She's been my co-conspirator for weeks. As if on cue, a small figure appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a quilt and beaming triumphantly. I told you she'd come back, Papa. I told you. Stella laughed, opening her arms to the child who flew into them. Merry Christmas, my darling girl. Did you bring the gingerbread recipe? Sarah asked excitedly. I brought something better. Stella reached into her coat pocket and withdrew a small, battered notebook. Your mother's recipe book. Your father mentioned she kept one, so I asked Mrs. Peterson if she knew where it might be. We found it in the root cellar with the preserves. Zachary stared at the familiar handwriting on the cover, emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Elizabeth's recipes. I thought they were lost. Not lost, Stella said gently. Just waiting to be found again. She took his hand in hers. Like so many things. Later that night, with Sarah finally asleep after much excitement, Zachary and Stella sat before the fire, her head resting on his shoulder as they talked of the future. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the ranch in pristine white, while inside, warmth and hope had returned to the home that had stood empty for too long. I still don't understand who placed that advertisement, Zachary mused. No one in town will admit to it. Stella smiled, fingering the ring now properly placed on her left hand. Perhaps some questions don't need answers. You sound like Sarah, with her talk of angels. Is it so hard to believe? She turned to face him. That love might reach beyond what we can see or understand. Zachary thought of Elizabeth's final promise to their daughter, that she would send help when they needed it most, and of the mysterious circumstances that had brought Stella to their door exactly when hope had seemed lost. No, he said softly, drawing her close. I suppose it isn't hard to believe it all. As midnight approached, bringing Christmas Day to the Two Pines Ranch, Zachary Nash held his future wife in his arms and offered silent thanks. To fate, to Providence, or perhaps to the woman who had loved him enough to ensure he would find love again. Whatever power had brought Stella Thompson to his door that autumn day, he would be forever grateful. For in the heart of the Montana wilderness, a rancher's daughter had recognized what the adults around her could not. That sometimes angels came in unexpected forms, and that a new cook really could change their world forever.